In the blue wardrobe of heaven are many unused clothes, too tight-fitting yet too beautiful to throw away. And in that wardrobe we hang our likenesses, yellowed diaries yellowed with yesterday, thumbs smeared with tomorrow. But the now, the present, like the hollow screech of ancient flamingos in search of shrimps, is still vibrantly, shocking pink. The afternoon was the colour of bruises, and beneath it, like a wounded snail, Rollinson End slept in a fretful, tight-eyed knot. And yet, not a mile away, awake, alive, thumping, and well after closing time, with unsmiling go-away windows, stood the Fool and Bladder. It looked very shut, but it wasn't. Sitting upright and silent on the bum-smoothed benches, drinking, were Rodney Bladdernot, Dr. Hatringer, and 3 waistcoats Lefebvre. But slumped and groaning over his scrumpy, old Scrotum the wrinkled retainer was unthawing, recovering from a freezing night in the graveyard of Rollinson End, spent uselessly on resurrection duty. But the dead at Rollinson End, buried upright to save space, remained disappointingly dead.
"Wasted good drinking time," grumbled Scrotum. "I thought one of 'em had come back one night, but it were a mole, so I bashed him one. I thought it were old Repentance Pimple come back to haunt us, but no."
Repentance Pimple had won the heart of Sir Henry and a place in the family graveyard for his remarkable ability to castrate lambs with his 3 remaining front teeth.
He was a resourceful man. Grew his thumbnails long to get the maggots out of them as needed it.
A crackling zazzle of dying sunlight starked the fields and fired the rusty tassel of Scrotum's fez. Choo! Scallywagging back home, the old man noticed tiny straggles of refugees and heard distant rifle fire, and he knew that Sir Henry was already up and culling the herd.
"Oh, Gord, I'm late."
And cock-eyed a legatee over a stile, he white-rabbity tipsily towards Rollinson End. In the green, dismaying shadows, dark-furred night crouched like a jungle at the edge of uncivilization, then sprang and tore at the stone flesh of Rollinson End. But in her soft, turreted boudoir, Great Aunt Florrie was gazing apprehensively towards the mirror. "Would you mind peeking first, my dear, just in case it's already occupied?" she said to Mrs. E. Mrs. E. glared boldly into the glass.
"It's quite uninhibited. It's empty, dear."
"Oh, goody," murmured Florrie with relief. It's almost like prying, isn't it? And I do so hate to disturb things. It can be thought very rude."
"Well, it's all clear, dear."
Mrs. E. slopped off down to the kitchens. Florrie began to hum to herself. "Henry is such a goose. He has delusions of gander. Oh, I must remember to say that this evening." Appearances are so misleading. the loony bins would overflow. If everybody knew our secret, the quiet that the spider knows. Take your trousers off and soak 'em overnight in Dolly blue. Can't you see the laughing faces? Englishmen will form a queue. The quiet that the spider knows. It was a fine purple evening, and for the great do, the dining hall of Rollinson End was decked with a festival emblazonry of spring. And, Rollinson End being quite the quiddity of Englishness, a large, unnecessary fire had been lit. This night, the company traditionally included a poor stranger sore buffeted by life. And this year, the lucky devil was the sore buffeted Ben Quake Buttock, the blind poacher. His crimes all forgotten on this day of rejoice. Somewhere in the house, Ben, the whole top half of his head obscured with a fancy knotted rag, was very drunk and lost. "Hello? Hello? I'm very excited. Hello?" The dinner table boasted daffodils on green linen with artistically arranged clods of soil. The napery was shaped like a fig leaf, and beside each rainbow-coloured plate was a potato shaped like a penis, with a candle stuck in the end. Great Aunt Florrie glided to her place at the foot of the table. In the quivering, fidgety orange of the candlelight, she looked very beautiful. She stared at her rearing potato. "Well, what do you think, Mr. Slodden?" But the Reverend Mr. Slodden, clergyman defrocked, exorcist and ex-Broadmoor, was transfixed, staring at Henry's younger brother Hubert, who was plinking a ukulele and buzzing. Hubert, in his mid-40s and still unusual, had plaited his beard with the slough skins of grass snakes, and had sequined his eyebrows in two green Gary glittering arcs of permanent surprise. Hubert leaned close to Mr. Slodden and said this: "In Tibet, the llamas step with ballerina toes. They only stop when their heads go pop, or if they need to blow their nose." Mr. Slodden sneezed.
Gee.
Mrs. E. poured him another glass of port.
Do you suffer with stubborn stains, dear?
I keep myself as an empty vessel for God to fill as he will. Then you must like pond fruit, cooed Florrie. I used to collect it as a child. And do you too like boats, Mr. Slodden? I do, ma'am, for as the good Lord said, it saves such a lot of walking. I know a lovely hymn. I learned it on my missionary travels. I was telling the story of the crucifixion to a party of Mongolian bandits, and... Gulping his drink, Mr. Slodden, his false legs squeaking, hobbled himself to the harmonium and fumbled a few uplifting chords. They loved this one, the bandits, he burbled. As he pumped the pedals, his cassock rode up to reveal that his grey sock on the wooden leg was attached with drawing pins. Hubert made up the words. He's walking on the water, spreading